So I returned from Dubai on the 31st of December and I returned with COVID. I was told that if I didn't improve on this machine, I would be going up to intensive care. And, that really scared me. And I just thought, if I go to intensive care, there's a good chance I'm probably going to die. Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. I know it's been a long time, but it's really hard to post content when you're in and out of lockdown and everywhere's closed. Anyway, I want to talk to you about a trip that I took on the 23rd of December 2020, where I went to Dubai. So basically, our UK Christmas plans had been ruined due to certain cities being placed in tier 4 lockdown, which meant we were unable to visit family over the Christmas period like we had planned to. Also, we'd not made any plans for ourselves to stay home. We didn't get any shopping in or anything, as we hadn't planned to stay home for Christmas. So on Friday the 18th of December, we weighed up our options and decided we were going to spend Christmas in Dubai. We did our research and looked at how many COVID cases were in the UAE, and we found that there weren't that many. So we went ahead and booked the flights. We also thought not a lot of people would be traveling due to the pandemic, and naively we just thought Dubai was going to be really quiet. Also, we thought a lot of people probably wouldn't be traveling because they can't be bothered to get PCR tests and the cost associated with that. So we were quite naive in thinking that Dubai was going to be really quiet. So we decided to take the risk and go away for Christmas. The next day, Saturday 19th, we booked our PCR test. We had our PCR tests. They were about £150 per person. So we got that. 2 days later, we got our certificates and we were fit to fly. Self-isolated for the next few days just to make sure that we didn't pick up COVID before getting on our flights. We're really responsible like that. So Wednesday, we checked in for our flight, boarded the plane, and we're on our way to Dubai. I'd say the flight was about 75% full, as we had seats to ourselves. We didn't have to share the row with anybody, and quite a few other people, had whole rows to themselves. So we didn't think it was going to be that busy. We had a great flight. We travelled with Emirates, and obviously they took precautions and everything was safe. At that time, when we booked our flight, Birmingham was not under tier 4 restrictions, so we were still in tier 3 and we were able to board our flight as usual. So we didn't do anything illegal. We didn't travel outside of our tier. I live in Birmingham and we travelled from Birmingham Airport, which was in tier 3. So we were actually permitted to leave the country if we so wished. When we arrived in Dubai, we were told if we had a fit to fly certificate, we went one way, and people who hadn't had a PCR test had to go a different way and get tested. At this point, I noticed quite a few people hadn't actually got the PCR test before travelling, and I was just really surprised about that. But I didn't think too much about it until we got onto the escalator. We saw massive queues of people waiting to go through passport control. The airport was just ram-packed. I couldn't believe my eyes. I'd never seen Dubai airport so ram-packed. It's a massive airport, and for it to be packed like that, tells you everything. People were pushing and shoving and jumping the queue. It was just impossible to socially distance from anybody. And at that point, I realised the people that went to get their PCR tests in the airport were then coming downstairs and mixing with us people who had had our tests and had our certificates. And that's when I started to get a little bit worried. I didn't like the idea of them mixing with people who had tested negative, because obviously we don't know if they're negative or positive. And we were in that queue for about 2 hours. It was so packed, it took about 2 hours to go through passport control before getting our baggage. But after we got our baggage, we got in a taxi. Taxi driver was wearing a mask, Everything was socially distanced and we felt safe once we were outside of the airport. So we headed to our hotel. So when you're in Dubai, it's actually mandatory to wear your mask all the time. Even in the street where there's nobody else around, you have to wear the mask. I don't know why, but that's just the way it is, which is fine. We did that. We were constantly sanitizing our hands and keeping a safe distance from other people. We dined outside. I think all of the time we ate outside. So good. You know, we were pretty safe. We do the same thing back home as well. The only time you don't have to wear a mask is when you're at the beach or when you're eating and drinking in a restaurant or something.
Yeah, so we're just going to go out for a bank food tonight again.
So we had a great holiday. We were going to lots of restaurants and beaches, just, you know, having a great time. Then on the last day, the 30th of December, I woke up with a sore throat. I just thought to myself, oh, maybe it's because I slept with the AC on. So I didn't think anything more about it. We had a nice day, went to the beach. Then we came back to the hotel and got ready for dinner. We sat outside again for dinner, but I started to feel a bit cold. Thought maybe because the temperature wasn't that high and I just had a dress on, you know, I was a bit cold. I was also getting a bit irritable and just feeling like I wanted to go back to the hotel. Then after we had dinner, I noticed that I started to feel really, really achy, that I was starting to get backache and my legs were aching a lot. And I just felt like I really needed a good massage. So I just said, let's go home. I'm not feeling well. I just want to lie down. So we left the restaurant early and headed back to our hotel, where we packed our suitcases and basically just went to bed because our flight was about 6-7 o'clock in the morning, so we didn't have much time to sleep. All through the night I kept going hot and cold, but I didn't think anything much about it. About 6 hours later, we were up and ready, heading to the airport. I was very groggy and tired and achy. I lacked energy. I could hardly walk through the airport. It was that bad. I was really, really tired. It was at that point I started to think to myself, you know, something's really wrong here. It's one thing being tired, but that just wasn't normal for me. So it was at that point I started to think maybe I do have symptoms of COVID. I was praying that they wouldn't take my temperature in the airport. Everywhere else we went in Dubai, they kept taking our temperature, and, you know, but on the way back in the airport, on the way back home, nobody took our temperature. So I was able to board my flight and, you know, nobody suspected anything. On the flight, I was going hot and cold. I was really irritable. I was really tired. So I just decided to put the blanket over my head and get some rest. So I slept for most of the way. I didn't really talk to anybody because I just wasn't in the mood. So once I got home, I had a shower, I washed my hair, and it took so much energy to do that. It was just ridiculous. I couldn't even dry my hair. I just had to put it all up and just leave it wet. I didn't even have the energy to dry my hair. After that, I just went to bed and tried to sleep it off. The next day, I was still feeling the same, so I decided to call my oncology team. As some of you might know, I'm a 2-time breast cancer survivor, and I'm still having chemotherapy. So I called my oncology team to see what they suggest, and they recommended that I go straight to the oncology ward. I went to hospital, and the first thing they did was a COVID test and blood test just to check my immune system hadn't been compromised. So I ended up staying in the hospital that night, and then the next morning they confirmed that I actually was COVID positive. I was actually quite surprised. Anyway, they told me my symptoms were mild, so they sent me home. They sent me home that same day. So that was the 1st of January. I was diagnosed with COVID. I was sent home, and over the course of a week, my symptoms got worse and worse and worse until the point where I couldn't breathe. I was gasping for breath. You know, I just couldn't walk to the toilet, couldn't do anything without gasping for breath. So in the end, my fiance checked my oxygen levels, and it was down to about 80%. At this point, he called the ambulance, and it was so bad I couldn't even walk down the stairs. So the paramedics had to take me in a stretcher to the ambulance because I could not walk anywhere. So they rushed me to the hospital, put me on oxygen straight away, about 4 litres I was on straight away. I was placed on a ward with 3 other ladies who had COVID, and for 5 days I was on just the regular oxygen. After those 5 days, they realised that, you know, I wasn't really getting any better, I was just staying the same. And that's when I realised, you know, this is quite serious. I could actually die. And that's when they decided to put me onto a machine called high flow. I was placed on the high flow machine, which is for severe COVID and pneumonia patients. And I was on this machine for around 5 or 6 days. Every day the critical care team were coming down to check up on me to see if I was improving at all. I was told that if I didn't improve on this machine, I would be going up to intensive care. And, you know, that really scared me. And I just thought, if I go to intensive care, there's a good chance I'm probably going to die. I'd be on a ventilator just like the people you see on the news. And, you know, that's just exactly where you don't want to be. So at this point, I started to research, you know, ways that I could help myself. And my mom actually told me about something called proning, which is just basically where you sleep on your front or your side, and it helps oxygen get to your lungs. So I asked the doctor about it, and he agreed that I could start doing that every night, well, all the time, to see if it helps. Alongside that, I was also doing my breathing exercises every hour. I was the one that had to ask the doctors and nurses about this. This information wasn't really given to me. Anyway, so after about 5 days of being on the high flow machine and proning and doing my breathing exercises, I started to improve. My oxygen levels were going up to around 90, 91%, 92%. And that's when they said I was well enough to go on to the original oxygen that I'd been on before. So they took me out of the side room and placed me back on a ward with the normal oxygen, but I was on a higher level of it. So they had to try and wean me off the oxygen. So every day they were turning it down bit by bit until the goal was to try and get me to breathe on my own with high oxygen levels of around 92%. It took until the 18th of January for me to be able to breathe on my own without any oxygen and have my levels up to about 92% or above. So it was at this point I was finally discharged from hospital. So I've been in hospital nearly 3 weeks now, and I'm finally going home today. Even though I still had shortness of breath, I was still allowed to go home. I couldn't really walk that far, but I'd still improved from the week before and the week before that. So I was sent home. So on my last day in hospital, the doctor came to see me, and he was saying that if I didn't come to hospital that day, I definitely would have died basically at home. and if I hadn't improved on the high flow machine, I would have been in intensive care. So he was really happy with my progress and discharged me from hospital. Today is the 1st of February. I've been home exactly 1 week, and the past week I've been forcing myself to do a little bit more each day, a little bit more walking, and I can see an improvement from last week, but I do still get out of breath. Just doing simple things around the house, I still get out of breath. So I'm having to take it easy. But they say the shortness of breath can last up to 3 months. Also, because I was in hospital for so long, I missed my chemotherapy appointment. So I just had it about 3 days ago. And they also tested me again before my chemo. And my COVID test actually came back negative, which was actually quite surprising. I thought it would be in my system for much longer, because I'm still having shortness of breath and everything. I thought it would be in my system for a bit longer. So guys, that was my experience of catching COVID in Dubai airport. 99% sure I caught it in the airport because there were just too many people. I was there for about 2 hours, and we were pretty safe everywhere else we went in Dubai. So that could really be the only place. Also, they say the incubation period is 5 or 6 days. So it all adds up. I caught it on the first day. I had symptoms by the last day, which was day 7. I just think Dubai airport could have dealt with the situation a lot better. They could have had people quarantining at the airport, or just don't allow them to come into the country without being tested and having a negative test. It's not really fair that some people have paid to be tested and get their negative test results. Then there are other careless or cheap people traveling without knowing their status. Everybody, I believe, who travels should have a negative test. Anyway guys, let me know what you think. Was I wrong to travel to Dubai? Let me know in the comments section, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.